Romancing Saga is a very unique series, especially in the context of other JRPGs. There aren't that many JRPGs that have meaningful choices at all, and most certainly not a lot of those choices, let alone non-linearity. But while we're limited in games because of those things, there are a decent amount of good games that are pretty similar to Romancing Saga, if not in all of their different parts, then at least in a few. The first that I'll be talking about is probably the most similar in terms of non-linearity, and it comes from an entire series of games. Metal Max 2 Reloaded is a remake of Metal Max 2 for the Nintendo DS. While it never officially reached North America, it does have a fan translation. One of the main draws for this is the open-ended nature of the game, allowing you to do whatever you would like and do missions in any order. Battles are turn-based, but there's a hook to that. You get to build your own fleet of tanks. You can fight either on foot or in tanks, so you'll be spending your time kitting yourself out for both scenarios. The game has a great sense of humor with an interesting post-apocalyptic setting that definitely brings something new, which I think fans of Romancing Saga will appreciate. Unfortunately, of the main series 4 games, not a single one has been officially translated to English, though the first 3 all have fan translations. Metal Saga and Metal Max Xeno do have official translations, though in my opinion they aren't quite as good. Still worth checking out if you're interested in the games and don't want to play a fan translation. Zil Old Infinite is a super unique game with a choice-driven narrative and non-linear progression. It will very much fit into any Romancing Saga fan's wheelhouse. It opens up from the start of the game, setting you up with some situations, allowing you to take control of how things play out. You can do quests, befriend characters, and by doing that, things will open up. Various character events will be triggered based on your relationships with those characters. You can romance and even kill those characters throughout the course of the game. There are 24 different endings in the original game, and Zil Old Infinite doubled that to 48, partially due to endings based on the gender of your character. There isn't a ton of information for this game in the West because, unfortunately, it was never released here. We did get a fan translation, though, for the PS2. Don't worry, not every game on this list hasn't been officially translated. For example, our next game, which I would label a bit more of a cult classic. Legend of Mana is an outlier in the Mana series, mostly because it plays out in a non-linear manner. But this one plays out even more differently than many other non-linear games because you're building the world as you play. There's a gridded map that represents the world, and at various points you gain the ability to add to that map. This system is much more complicated than it seems at first, since maps have levels associated with them that change depending on how you build out the map. There are a ton of different events, and some can play out very differently depending on which side you decide to pick at various points. The combat is more of an action RPG style, which is what the Mana series is known for, and because of the land systems and non-linearity, this is a game you can play many times before you're done with it. It was also remastered fairly recently and ported to modern consoles and PC, so it's very easily accessible. Valkyrie Profile is a bit of an oddball in a list of oddballs that I included on this list. I included it because it does have a lot of unique aspects to it that have some similarities to Romancing Saga, but also because it's a great game that just doesn't get mentioned enough. Valkyrie Profile has some interesting choices for you to make in character recruitment, what you do with those characters. You can send characters to Valhalla, and how you do that will affect the ending of the game and how things progress. It also has a bit of non-linearity when it comes to the way you go through different areas, which allows for some interesting variability in playthroughs, and it has a very different system in terms of gameplay, in that it plays out at times like a 2D platformer with turn-based combat. It isn't a simple turn-based system though. It has a system where you can do combos based on which characters attack and when they attack that can unleash huge damage if done correctly. It's a bit of a weird one, but I think Romancing Saga fans will like that. Octopath Traveler is somehow one of the least weird games on here, having more traditional combat systems and more straightforward storylines, but don't let that fool you. That's more of a nod to the rest of the games on this list for being weird as hell, than it is for Octopath not being unique. Octopath Traveler has kind of perfected a great combat system that uses weaknesses and breakpoints, enough so that Romancing Saga 2 Remake uses some of those ideas. Octopath Traveler is also very non-linear, allowing you to pick and choose where you go, who you meet, though in the end the story plays out largely the same. It has a ton of different underlying systems based on the characters that you're using, which each have their own unique abilities, and as the name suggests, there are 8 of them that you can choose with their own unique storylines. This one might lean a little bit more towards Saga Frontier or Minstrel Song, but it's well worth checking out for fans of Romancing Saga. And we're done looking at games outside of the Saga series, but I thought it'd be good to point towards something in it as well. A bit of a lesser known set of games in the Saga series in the West are the 2 DS games Saga 2 Hiho Densetsu and Saga 3 Jiku no Hasha. They're better known in the US as Final Fantasy Legend 2 and 3, but the DS versions are remakes of the 2 games for the original Game Boy. Much like some of the other games on this list, the DS versions were never officially translated, but they have fan translations, so I think they don't get mentioned enough. These are very fun and unique games with a lot of the aspects that make Romancing Saga great. You can really feel how they were ramping up the Saga series in these games, so I think it's worthwhile for fans of the series to try them out. And that's it! Hopefully, that gives you a place to start for finding games like Romancing Saga. If anyone has any other suggestions, feel free to mention them in the comments. Thanks for watching.